From now on, you report directly to me." That's how she said it. Calm, sharp, like the click of a gun being loaded. Her first day. White suit, perfect hair, confidence dripping like perfume. The room went dead quiet. You could hear the hum of the lights, the breath people were afraid to take. I didn't argue, didn't blink, just smiled once, the kind of smile that hides a storm, and laid a single black file on her desk. Internal audit review. Confidential. She looked down at it, then back at me, and for a heartbeat, I saw fear flicker behind her eyes. I turned, walked away, and started counting. 10, 9, 8. I knew exactly when the blast would hit. Because in this world, silence is the sharpest weapon a man can use. If you've ever waited for your moment, don't miss the next part. Subscribe and stay with me. My name's Ethan Cole, 48, the kind of age where your hands remember what your head forgot. I came up with Skycore when it was still heat and coffee and code in a rented garage off South Lamar. The paint peeled, the AC rattled, and the only suits we owned were for funerals. We built anyway, brick by brick, line by line, until that little furnace of noise turned into a glass tower slicing the Austin skyline. 27 people used to call me boss. Not because I shouted, but because when the server crashed at 2 a.m., I was already there, sleeves rolled, eyes steady. Richard Hayes was beside me then, the brother I trusted to the bone. We started with nothing, built something, swore we'd never sell our souls for numbers. Then we did. The company got glossy. Investors circled, the talk shifted to valuation and exit strategy. I kept my head down, built what they bragged about. But even from the top floor I could smell the change. Sweet, fake, expensive. You can polish a wolf's teeth, it still bites. I was the backbone here, and I could feel the body twisting above me. Something was coming, something sharp. And I knew the first crack wouldn't come from outside, it would come from the people I trusted most. Then the money men arrived, and everything they touched turned cold. They spoke in numbers, never names, speed over sense, optics over truth. Meetings multiplied like weeds. They sliced our days into charts and called it innovation. The lights turned whiter, surgical, heartless. The air smelled of sanitizer and fear. Richard stopped visiting my floor. His shoes made no sound on the polished concrete. He started saying things like scalability and cost centers, words that left a bad taste. I stayed. That's what men like me do. You hold the line even when it cuts your hands. I kept walking the floor every morning, touching each desk like a farmer checking fences. Systems don't fail, people do, and people fail when they stop caring. Some nights, I sat alone in that bright tomb of an office, listening to the hum of servers. Underneath it, a quieter rhythm, the tick of a clock no one else heard. Tick, tick, tick. Every beat closer to the moment it would all break. I didn't know her name yet, but soon she'd walk through those doors in a white suit and light the fuse. She arrived on a Monday, a clean break in a white suit. Clara Benton, the kind of entrance that makes a whole floor sit up straighter. She moved like she owned the air, smiled like a blade, quick, bright, a little too eager to draw blood. When she shook my hand, her grip was careful, calculated. "I'm here to learn from you," she said, eyes steady, like she already knew how this place beat. I walked her through the bones, not the tour HR gives, the real map, the servers that run hot after midnight, the vendors who say yes then stall, the dashboards that lie if you don't ask the right questions, the places where our system creaks if a launch goes sideways. She listened without interrupting, head tilted, pen moving like a metronome. "That's smart," she'd say. "I hadn't thought of it that way." Flattery tailored to fit a man my age, measured, respectful, never too much. We stood in the glass corridor that slices the floor, Austin's sun bouncing off her cufflinks. "Your process is elegant," she said. "You make it look simple." I told her simplicity is the last stage of hard work. She nodded, wrote that down too, like a student saving a quote. I showed her the audit trail logic, the way a mistake leaves fingerprints. I watched her eyes brighten. Curiosity, I told myself. Investment. She asked for access to read more, to help. I gave it, cautious, generous, proud of what we'd built. I called it mentorship. I called it respect. It wasn't. It was reconnaissance. And I didn't see it. Yet. The first cut was quiet. A calendar invite I never got. Then another. Meetings that used to require my signature somehow ran fine without my name. "We must have missed you," someone typed, late, like a courtesy for the record. Email threads skipped my address as if it were a stain. Slack channels multiplied and shifted. Conversations I started ended somewhere I wasn't allowed to go. On the floor, people looked busy in a new way. Eyes trained past me, past anything that wasn't trending. "Hey, Ethan," they'd say, like you say to the guy who built the fence you're about to climb over. Friendly, distant, practiced. I kept doing the work. Tickets closed. Risks flagged. Vendors pushed to deliver. That's the thing about being the spine. You hold even when the body twists above you. The office sounds changed. Less talk, more tapping. More, let's circle back. Less, let's fix it. HR sent a coaching note about modern tone, as if tone can carry a server at 2 a.m. A junior PM avoided my eyes in the kitchen. Her hand shook, pouring coffee. Somewhere a decision had been made that no one would say out loud. Silence took on shape. It had a schedule. My schedule, emptied. It had a smell. Fresh paint over something rotten. It had a weight. The drop in a room when I walked in. You don't need a memo to know you've been moved. So I kept walking the floor, checking fences only I still cared about, listening for the sound beneath the hum. That night, I found it. A folder I was never meant to see. It was close to midnight when I hit send on the final report. The office had gone silent hours ago, just the hum of the servers, the soft click of the AC, the glow of my monitor cutting through the dark. I leaned back, rubbed my eyes, and saw it. A folder I hadn't noticed before, tucked between project archives and system logs. Transition plan. Curiosity is a slow poison. I opened it. Inside, org charts, titles, notes from HR, version history stretching back weeks. Then my name, crossed out once, replaced, and pushed down a line. Her name above mine. Clara Benton, Director of Operations. I scrolled to the bottom. The author tag read, Clara Benton. The approval stamp, Richard Hayes. For a second, I waited for anger. It didn't come. No heat, no tremor. No, just cold spreading behind the ribs, steady and familiar, like frost on a window. I stared at that word, redundant. It doesn't mean useless. It means replaceable, disposable, a polite way of saying you've served your time. I closed the folder, but the glow of it stayed on my face. That's how betrayal works in real life. No gunshot, no headline, just a quiet click and a title you no longer hold. I didn't slam the desk or curse the screen. I just whispered to myself, okay. Then I started counting. Not seconds, not minutes. Counting the distance between trust and truth. And that distance, I knew, was shrinking fast. The next morning, I printed everything. Not PDFs, not screenshots. Paper. Real paper. The smell of toner and hot ink filled the room, the kind of smell that used to mean something built, not buried. Each sheet came out like a heartbeat. Logins, approvals, meeting summaries, timestamps. The proof of what they were doing. The proof of what I had built. I stacked the pages, hole-punched them, slid them into a black binder like it was armor. Then I started the backups. External drive 1, encrypted. External drive 2, mirrored and hidden. Cloud copy under an alias only I could trace. Audit logs, IP trails, version histories. Every digital footprint they thought no one would notice. The printer stopped, and for the first time I heard my own breathing. Calm. Even. Too calm. That's when I realized what I'd become. A shadow. They moved in meetings. I moved in silence. They played politics. I read metadata. I stopped being an employee that night. I became the ghost of every file they ever touched. You can wipe systems, lock accounts, bury evidence under layers of access control. But the past, if you know where to look, always leaves fingerprints. They could rewrite the story all they wanted. I had the original draft. If they erased the present, the past would still speak, and I would make sure it spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. A week later, she caught me in the hallway. "Ethan, that presentation you did last quarter, impressive work." Her tone was polished, perfectly neutral, like a manager giving a museum tour. People passing by smiled, but their eyes said it all. I wasn't being praised, I was being archived. I thanked her, because that's what men my age do. We don't fight compliments, we just pocket them and keep walking. But as I walked, I could feel the distance grow, me on one side, the new world on the other. Later that day, HR emailed me. Subject line, coaching feedback. Inside, a single line, modernize your tone. No examples, no context, just the cold suggestion that my voice, the same one that carried this company through every storm, was now outdated. I clicked received, not agree, not thank you, just received. That word felt like a coffin lid closing. Clara passed me again near the glass conference room. "Don't take it personally," she said, all soft edges and knowing eyes. "The company's evolving." Evolving. That's what they call it when they push men like me out with polite smiles and performance jargon. I went back to my desk, the one they'd moved to the far end of the floor, near the printer that always jammed. I opened my inbox. Meetings I used to lead now had new owners. My name, still on the list, just without authority. It hit me then. Gaslighting had become policy. They didn't want me gone, not yet. They wanted me doubting myself first. And that's how it starts. Small, silent, professional. A death by 1,000 compliments. I started spending my nights at a diner off the highway. Greasy tables, good coffee, and a jukebox that only played Springsteen. "I'm on Fire" drifted through the static while the neon sign blinked out front like a heartbeat trying to keep rhythm. I'd take the corner booth, the one facing the window, open my notebook, and start connecting dots. Names, timestamps, approvals. Everything they thought I'd deleted, I still had. The waitress, Bonnie, knew my order by heart. Black coffee, no sugar. She'd refill the cup without asking. "Rough week?" she'd say. I'd nod, because explaining betrayal requires more words than coffee can hold. Each night, I'd mark the date, the time, who signed what, who looked away. I drew lines between their initials until the pattern began to show. A quiet conspiracy, neat and corporate. Then I underlined it. Section 7.3, misrepresentation. The clause no one wanted to talk about. The one buried deep in the merger documents. The one that could burn them all. I traced it again, slower this time, the way you trace a scar. Outside, a semi roared past, shaking the window. Inside, the lights buzzed, steady, tired. I closed my notebook, slid it beside the folder labeled Internal Audit Review, and stared at my reflection in the glass. I wasn't angry anymore. I was preparing. You don't walk into a storm without a map. And that night, in that diner off South Lamar, I realized I had one. Every signature, every lie, every fuse line. I had the blueprint for the fire they started. Richard started avoiding me. The man who once called me brother couldn't hold my eyes for more than a second. Meetings I used to lead now happened behind closed doors, with laughter that stopped the moment I walked by. The boardroom blinds stayed shut. The glass walls that once made this place feel transparent had turned opaque. Rumors moved faster than truth ever could. Someone mentioned an off-site in Miami, a leadership retreat, they said. I wasn't invited, of course. The next week, an internal memo floated by with a photo half-cropped in the corner. Richard, tan and relaxed, and beside him, Clara. The caption read, "Building Future Synergy." I didn't save the photo. I didn't need to. Scandal is smoke. Logs are fire. People whispered. HR smiled too often, and the interns stopped making eye contact. But I didn't care who was sleeping with who. That's tabloid fuel. What I cared about was the pattern in the documents, the gaps between approvals, the timing of transfers. Those were fingerprints. Those were truths. It's funny how betrayal always starts with noise, gossip, laughter, lies, and ends in silence. The kind of silence that makes men like Richard forget what real loyalty sounds like. I stayed quiet. watched, counted days, signatures, timestamps. Every whisper they spread was just cover for the thing they didn't want anyone to see. And I was done chasing shadows. I wasn't hunting scandal anymore. I was hunting proof. The proof came wrapped in a headline. Skycore announces biggest merger of the year. They called it progress. I called it theater. The valuation numbers looked too perfect. Smooth, inflated, airbrushed. I'd seen real numbers before. They were messy, uneven, scarred with the truth of late nights and human error. This was different. This was plastic. I opened the draft files buried in the shared drive, and there it was. Electronic signatures layered over corrections, data adjusted to hit target projections. The audit trail showed a timestamp out of sequence, like someone had forced the system to overwrite the truth. I followed the trail to finance. An email thread, late at night, Richard pressing the accounting lead. We need this locked before the board sees it. Numbers drive confidence. Just make it work. The tone wasn't a request. It was a command. And at the bottom, Clara's name. Not copied. Not blind copied. Approved. I didn't send anything. Not yet. Timing is everything. Drop the truth too soon, it burns out. Too late, it loses heat. So I waited. Watched. Collected. Every false number. Every overwritten field. Every approval chain that smelled of panic. I stored it all. One by one, I could see the dots lining up like gasoline drops on a fuse, and all it would take was one spark, one perfectly chosen moment, for it to catch. Because in a world built on lies, truth doesn't whisper, it explodes. Chain of custody isn't a slogan, it's a spine. I spent a morning tracing every hand that ever touched the numbers, who created, who edited, who approved, what device, what IP, what minute. I built a ladder of timestamps and climbed it rung by rung until there was nowhere left to pretend. When I asked internal audit for a pull of their review queue, they replied with a smiley sentence about bandwidth and priorities. Delay. A tidy word that buys liars time. Down the hall, a board member I'd known for years passed without a nod. He used to be a handshake and a straight question. Today he was polished shoes and weather talk. The sort of silence that isn't empty at all. It's packed with caution, heavy as lead. Linda Shaw came by with a folder hugged to her ribs, eyes flicking once to my screen, once to my face. Nothing said. Everything said. She doesn't traffic in rumors. She keeps records. In the glass reflection, I watched my own mouth set into that line it gets when I've decided something. I closed the audit window and opened another, the one where the truth lives after business hours. In the fields, no one checks until it's too late. By lunch, my map was cleaner. The gaps were smaller, the fingerprints darker. No speeches, no threats, just data stacking itself into judgment. In this place, people love to talk. But today, the quiet testified, and the quiet was enough. That's when my phone lit up with a calendar ping from Clara. Align expectations? I said yes. She chose a corner room for alignment, the kind with too much glass and air that smells like unwrapped plastic. Clara sat close enough that her perfume cooled the space between us. I want us to win together, she said, smooth, like reading a line that's been practiced in a mirror. The word together hovered, warm at the edges, empty in the middle. I nodded once. Men my age have learned to conserve words. She leaned in, asking smart questions about workflows I'd built by memory and scar tissue, where approvals choke, where vendors hide, where a dashboard flatters the wrong person. I answered without fluff. She took notes like a violinist marking a score, precise, fast, sure. When she smiled, it wasn't flirting. It was reconnaissance disguised as praise. Your process is elegant, she said. You make it look simple. I told her simplicity is what remains after you remove every lie. She wrote that down too. I opened a schema on my laptop. Audit trails, signature hashes, the custody path of documents that shouldn't have moved. I watched her pupils tighten as the pattern surfaced. She pushed the laptop back gently, like putting down a hot plate. We're on the same side, Ethan. Sure. I saved the session and added one more entry to a folder she didn't know existed. Another log on a growing stack. Not revenge. Record. Outside the glass, the floor kept spinning. Emails, smiles, a mural about speed. Inside, we sat in a pocket of cold truth no one else could feel. Win together, she'd said. I stood, shook her hand, and decided the rest in my head, or burn together. And I knew which way the wind was blowing. HR changed my job description with a smile you couldn't argue with. New title, advisory. New scope, provide historical context as needed. They called it a temporary restructure, the way a doctor calls it a procedure while holding a scalpel. Richard forwarded the memo with a thumbs-up emoji. Clara replied, all with gratitude. I didn't reply at all. I boxed the desk I'd paid for with years. A few pens, a photo from the garage days, a mug someone gave me the night we hit our first million. I carried it to my truck and drove home slow, letting Austin's heat press the noise out of my head. In the garage, I set the box on the workbench and looked at my shelves. Black binders, labeled spines, external drives, numbered, a metal tin full of spare key cards and old security fobs. The air smelled like oil and dust. Honest smells, no perfume. I lined up the drives, checked the backups, plugged each one in, listened for the tiny spin-up whine that says, still alive. Paper rustled, plastic clicked. Memory settled back into my hands the way a hammer fits a carpenter's grip. They could have the chair, the title, the window, the new carpet. I had something heavier. Keys. Not just the metal kind that open server cages. The kind made of times and names and audit trails. The kind you carry in your head until someone thinks you're too old to remember. I set the last binder down and flipped it open to a clean page. If they were going to lock me out, I decided I'd do one thing first. I'd wire the truth to let itself in. I built a dead man's switch the way a man builds a fence after coyotes. Simple, sturdy, no gaps. Rule 1. If my account gets locked, the package moves, automatically, to compliance. No CC, no FYI, no per my last email. It lands in their inbox like a brick through a window. I bundled the chain of custody, the signature hashes, the timestamp ladder, the Miami week when approvals got cute. Compressed, encrypted, then encrypted again. 2 locks, 1 passphrase only I would know, 1 key file stored on a hardware token I kept on my keyring next to a scratched Chevy fob. If they cut one rope, the other held. Recipients, the entire committee, legal, audit, Linda's office, no single point of failure. Subject line, internal integrity packet, automatic release. Body text, short and clean. If you're reading this, access to my account has been suspended. Contents include verifiable records tied to Section 7.3, misrepresentation, chain of custody preserved. I didn't announce it. I tested it. I simulated a lockout with a decoy account, watched the rule fire, watched the mail hop relays and land where it needed to land. On my phone, a quiet ping from an external monitor I'd set up years ago. Delivered. I breathed once. Not relief, confirmation. Systems either work or they don't. This one worked. Back at the garage bench, I snapped the token back on my ring and closed the laptop. The house settled around me, Texas night thick as felt. Let them play with doors and badges and access lists. Let them think control is a switch they own. They lock me out. The truth lets itself in. Clara got promoted on a Tuesday. HR sent a floor-wide email with confetti emojis in the subject line. Congratulations to our new Director of Operations, Clara Benton. By noon, the place smelled like flowers and cheap champagne. Someone brought in cupcakes with frosting that bled company colors. Cameras flashed. People clapped. They always clap when they're told who to follow next. I stood behind the glass wall, hands in my pockets, watching her shake hands like a politician. Her new nameplate gleamed under the soft lights. Clara Benton, Director. Richard stood beside her, smiling that tired CEO smile, half pride, half relief. He looked like a man handing off a live grenade wrapped in a bow. Someone noticed me, maybe out of guilt, maybe curiosity. I nodded once, enough to keep the peace. My reflection in the glass looked steady, almost calm. Inside, my pulse tapped slow, measured. I wasn't jealous, not even angry. That's the thing about age. You learn to save your fire for when it counts. I'd already seen too many people burn themselves up too early. I just watched the room light up around her and thought, so this is how it begins. Every empire celebrates its conqueror right before the fall. I counted the beats under my breath. steady as a clock winding itself. Not from rage, from patience, because I wasn't waiting to win her respect anymore. I was waiting for the right moment to end the game. Heels and a sharper edge. The air smelled like new paint and perfume, ambition layered over nerves. "From now on," she said, without looking up, "you report directly to me." That was the line, the one I'd been waiting to hear. I smiled once, the kind of smile that doesn't show teeth. Understood. I set the black folder on her desk, thin, unassuming, labeled in my handwriting, "Internal Audit Review, Confidential." Her hand hesitated above it, just long enough for me to see something crack behind her practiced calm. She masked it fast, but I saw it. Everyone does, the first time they realize the table they're sitting at isn't solid. It's glass. I turned, walked to the door. The whole floor watched through the transparent walls. No one said a word. No one ever does when power changes hands. They just hold their breath and wait to see who breaks first. The latch clicked behind me, quiet but final. Outside, the hum of the office returned, a sound that always felt routine but now ticked differently, like gears shifting, like something beginning to move. I didn't look back. In my head, I counted again. 10, 9, 8. The countdown had started. Not to her victory, to the moment the truth would find her. The door sealed the sound of my footsteps, but in the silence that followed, even the clocks seemed to wake up and start keeping score. She opened the file like she was unwrapping a gift she didn't remember asking for. A few pages in, the confidence drained from her face. Section 7.3 blinked on the screen. Misrepresentation of financial data. The kind of clause that can turn careers into headlines. She scrolled faster. The chain of emails unfolded like a confession. Richard's directives, her replies, the timestamps lining up too perfectly to be coincidence. There it was in black and white. Pressure to adjust numbers before the board sees them. Her approval, her digital signature, her login ID. Every scroll tightened the noose. The log entries didn't accuse, they recorded. That's what data does. It remembers. And in the sterile glow of her new office, every memory stared back at her. Her hands started to tremble. Not shaking from guilt yet, but from recognition, the kind that hits when the story you thought you were writing suddenly turns on you. She looked toward Richard's office, the glass walls suddenly too thin. The flowers on her desk, the polished nameplate, the congratulatory emails still pinned to her inbox. All of it started to look ridiculous. Section 7.3 wasn't just a paragraph in policy. It was a fuse line, already lit. Her breath hitched once, short and sharp. I could see it through the glass, the way a person realizes too late they've stepped into the center of a burning room. She was still trying to decide whether to run or to fight, but either way, she was already surrounded by fire. 10 minutes later, her door slammed. The tone of the floor shifted, the kind of silence that means trouble's in motion. She'd called legal first, then HR. You could tell by the quick heels, the clipped whispers, the shuffle of paper meant to sound like control. When I passed her office, she was pacing, voice sharp. "Evidence tampering," she said. "Someone's trying to set me up." I didn't stop walking, just leaned in the doorway long enough for her to notice. "Tampering?" I said quietly. "That's a big word, Clara." Her eyes darted to the file still open on the screen, then back to me. "You think this is funny?" "No," I said. "Logs don't laugh." That shut her up for a second. Legal arrived, a young guy in a too-tight suit holding a notepad like a shield. HR followed, all smiles and panic perfume. They whispered, they nodded, they called for IT. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. I pointed to the audit log on her monitor, the time, the access path, the approval signature. "That's not my handwriting," I said. "That's the system's." The IT lead confirmed it, quietly, quickly, like a man who knows the difference between human error and digital truth. Richard's door stayed closed the entire time. No one went in, no one came out. By the time I walked away, legal was sweating, HR was smiling too hard, and Clara's pulse was visible in her neck. She wanted to make this about words, narrative, intent, context. But I don't deal in stories anymore. I deal in logs, and logs don't lie. It didn't take long. When people can't kill the truth, they try to kill the witness. It got the order that afternoon. Terminate my access, revoke credentials, lock accounts. Official reason: system security precaution. Mark Jensen was the one assigned. Good kid, sharp, liked clean code and quiet days. He walked over to my desk, laptop in hand, eyes not quite meeting mine. I was told to, I nodded. Do what you have to do. He hesitated. Ethan, this doesn't feel right. Nothing about this place feels right anymore, I said. Press the button. His fingers hovered, then clicked. The screen went dark. A red line appeared. Access revoked. That's how fast it happens. 10 years of building, gone with a single keystroke. No explosion, no noise, just silence and the faint buzz of the monitors around me. Mark swallowed hard. You'll fix this, right? I looked at him. It's already fixed. He didn't understand. He wasn't supposed to. They thought that cutting me off meant cutting off the story. They didn't know I'd already handed the story over to the system itself. I stood, slid my badge across the desk and told him to keep it. Souvenir, I said. He didn't smile. As I walked toward the elevator, I heard the floor breathing behind me. Relief, guilt, confusion. The kind of air that fills a place when people think the danger's gone. They thought they'd won. But you don't win by pulling the plug on a man who's already wired the truth to power. You just start the countdown. I left the building without looking back. The parking lot was polished chrome under the Texas sun, every car lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. I walked slow, calm, steady, the kind of calm that only comes after the trigger's been pulled. When I slid into my truck, the seat felt colder than usual. I turned the key. The radio came on, but no sound came out, just static and a faint hum. Maybe the station was dead. Maybe it was just quiet before the noise. Then my phone buzzed. A calendar alert. 4:00 p.m. Flash audit meeting. Right on time. I stared at it for a second, thumb hovering above the screen, watching the seconds tick down. The sun cut through the windshield, sharp and white, reflecting the tower's glass back at me. From this distance, Skycore looked clean, almost innocent. But I knew better. Inside those walls, the file I'd built was about to open itself. The system would execute the rule. Automatic delivery, multiple recipients, no recall. A digital judgment day, scheduled like a board meeting. I rested my hand on the steering wheel and listened to the hum of the engine. The air outside was heavy, like the sky holding its breath. No more plans, no more guessing, just timing. At 4:00 sharp, that building would stop pretending to be holy. I didn't feel proud, didn't feel angry, just ready. I looked at the tower one last time, its mirrored surface throwing my reflection back at me. Small, steady, silent. And I thought, the storm doesn't wait. It arrives right on schedule. At exactly 4:00 p.m., the switch flipped itself. No sound, no alarm, just an invisible chain of commands moving through the system the way lightning travels through wire. Compliance got the first hit, an email with my name in the sender line, time-stamped, verified, untampered. Then came the attachments. The folder unfolded itself. Message trails, signatures, document hashes, server logs, IP addresses. Every breadcrumb laid out in perfect order, because truth doesn't need editing, it just needs release. Linda Shaw was the first to open it. She was meticulous, fast, the kind of reader who doesn't flinch when a knife of fact cuts through a decade of illusion. I'd trusted her silence. Now it spoke. She read every log, every cross-check, lips pressed tight, eyes narrowing. The conference room turned still. The blinds that had been drawn for months finally caught a beam of sunlight, slicing through the air like an indictment. On the main monitor, names began to repeat. Richard Hayes, Richard Hayes, Richard Hayes. Next to his, Clara Benton. Approval chains linking them like fingerprints pressed into concrete. By 4:07, the file had reached every compliance officer, every board member, every legal account that mattered. The truth wasn't mine anymore. It had left my hands, crossed the firewall, and found new guardians, the kind that wear badges instead of smiles. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't have to prove anything. The proof was proving itself. In that moment, something in the air shifted. Power changed rooms. The truth had stopped belonging to me. Now it belonged to them. The next wave hit within minutes. Clara's door opened to a crowd that wasn't clapping this time. Legal, compliance, HR, 2 board members who couldn't look her in the eye. She started talking before they even sat down. "I was pressured," she said. "Richard signed off on every number. I was following orders." The lawyer across from her leaned forward, pen tapping the table. "Do you have evidence of that, Ms. Benton?" Her voice faltered. He sent delegation approvals. There's a document." They asked her to show it. She clicked through folders, desperate now, and there it was, an email chain from the Miami offsite. Subject line, "Delegation of authority." Attached, her acceptance. The timestamp matched the week the fake numbers went live. Richard's name sat above hers, his digital signature right below the words "proceed as discussed." The room went still. The kind of still that only happens when guilt finds air. Clara's face drained of color. "He told me it was clean," she whispered. "Did you verify that?" Legal asked. Her lip trembled. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. On the screen, her own login credentials flashed again and again, binding her to every move she'd made. She wasn't the architect, but she'd poured the foundation. Collateral damage always looks innocent until the lights come on. Outside, the blinds trembled in the wind from the AC. Inside, you could feel the temperature drop. Richard had written the play. She just read her lines. But in this room, every script burns the same way. By late afternoon, the board called Richard in. No smiles, no handshakes. Just a quiet summons and a door closing behind him like a vault. He walked in calm, wearing the same confidence he'd worn for years. Tailored, pressed, expensive. He spoke first, before anyone could. "I have no idea what's going on here," he said, "but I assure you this company has always acted with integrity." Integrity. He used it like a brand name. Linda didn't flinch. She reached into her folder, slid a printed page across the table. Section 7.3, the line that had started it all. Her finger tapped the paragraph once, soft but final. "Then maybe you can explain this." He looked down. His jaw twitched. "That's not my approval," he said. "Someone forged the timestamp." Linda leaned back, eyes steady. "The system doesn't forge itself, Richard, and logs don't write fiction." The others around the table shifted. One cleared his throat, another crossed his arms. When she asked, "Who else signed these documents?" Nobody answered. She repeated the question slower. "Who else signed?" The silence turned dense, like smoke filling a closed room. Richard's eyes darted from one face to another, searching for an ally or maybe a scapegoat. No one met his gaze. Because rot never walks alone. It always travels in packs, hiding in the corners of clean offices and polished titles. And in that room full of suits, the air itself smelled of guilt. Someone had helped him. The only question left was, who? And whoever it was, they were still sitting at that table. The IT team was called in next, summoned like mechanics to a wreck that everyone swore wasn't their fault. They moved fast, plugging laptops into the conference system, screens flickering with audit trails and authentication keys. Mark Jensen was there too, quieter than usual. His fingers moved across the keyboard like a man disarming a bomb. After a few minutes, he stopped typing. "There are 2 approval keys," he said. Richard blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," Mark replied, "this document couldn't have been authorized by one person alone." He tapped again, pulling up the metadata. The room's temperature dropped 10 degrees. The second key appeared on screen, an encrypted ID belonging to one of the board members. For a moment, nobody spoke. The hum of the projector filled the space where truth had landed. HR, always quick with words, didn't have any. The woman in charge of recording minutes just kept writing, her pen trembling over the page. The legal counsel coughed once and stared at his hands. 3:30 p.m. The wall clock ticked louder than it should have. Linda broke the silence. So this wasn't one person's mistake. It was a coordinated act. No one corrected her. No one dared. What began as a single scandal had now grown teeth. It wasn't just a bad decision or a forged report. It was systemic. a rot that had spread high enough to infect the people meant to guard against it. Richard's face went pale. Clara looked at the table, fingers knotted together, and for the first time the board realized the building wasn't just on fire, it was built with gasoline. My phone buzzed. A message from Mark. They're panicking. 3 words, no punctuation. I could almost hear his voice, low, steady, the way a man sounds when he's standing close to the truth and knows it could burn. I typed back, "Don't delete the logs." His reply came fast. "Never." That was all we needed. No plans, no speeches. Just the quiet understanding between 2 men who'd been told to look away their entire careers and finally decided not to. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes for 10 seconds. The kind of 10 seconds you take to remember who you were before everything got loud with lies. Outside, the Texas heat pressed against the glass, thick and dry. The air shimmered over the highway, a mirage of movement that looked like fire if you stared too long. I thought about the years Mark had spent in that server room, about the times he'd patched systems overnight while others took credit. He'd never cared about power or politics or promotions. He just wanted the truth to stay clean. Now even neutrality had a side. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't need believers. It just needs witnesses. And when the moment comes, even the quiet ones have to choose which side of the firewall they stand on. I opened my eyes, feeling the sweat bead at my collar. The city outside kept moving, oblivious. Inside, a different kind of heat was rising, the kind that doesn't come from weather, the kind that burns, lies into light. I found Clara alone in the boardroom later that evening. The crowd was gone, the flowers wilted, and the blinds half drawn like someone couldn't decide whether to hide or confess. She sat slumped in her chair, phone face down, hair undone. When she looked up, her eyes were hollow, not defiant, not broken, just emptied out. "How long have you known?" she asked. I stood by the doorway. "Since the night they deleted my name from the company directory." Her lips parted, then closed again. She looked down at her hands, twisting the ring she always wore when she lied. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said. "I thought it was just politics. Numbers." I stepped closer, the echo of my shoes breaking the quiet. "Politics doesn't forge signatures, Clara. It doesn't doctor valuations or bury audit trails." Her breath caught. Richard said a lot of things," I cut in, "and you believed the ones that paid best." Silence. Long, sharp, heavy. She nodded slowly, the truth finally finding its way through her defenses. "You could ruin me," she said. I looked at the black folder on the table, the one that had started it all. The red tab gleamed in the low light. "I don't want you ruined," I said. "I want you honest." She blinked, tears she wouldn't let fall balancing in her eyes. "And if honesty kills me," I leaned down, voice flat, "then at least it won't lie for him." The room felt colder after that. I didn't need her to break. I needed her to talk. Richard's first move was instinct. He picked up the phone and called the PR director before the board could finish the sentence. You could see it through the glass, him pacing, voice low but desperate, trying to bend the story before it hit air. But there's a rule about damage. Once the truth starts breathing, it doesn't go back in the box. By 2:30 p.m., the comms team had already gotten word from outside. Someone had leaked the internal memo, the one meant only for executive visibility. It was on 3 Slack threads, 1 Reddit post, and half a dozen inboxes marked anonymous source. PR told him flat, "We can't contain this." He snapped something about lawyers and confidentiality, but you could tell he knew. The sound of control leaving a man's voice is unmistakable. It goes thin, like air leaking from a tire. Linda moved fast. She shut down the internal portal, locked external logins, and suspended admin privileges across the network. "Contain what you can," she told a T. But it wasn't containment anymore. It was triage. Outside the glass walls, whispers turned into messages, messages into calls. People moved like they'd seen lightning strike the building. Then, a door swung open. The boardroom. The noise of it hitting the wall made everyone flinch. Richard stepped out, jaw clenched, face red. Cameras weren't rolling, but everyone knew what came next. There's a moment when words stop working, when spin, denial, and charm all die the same quiet death. He'd just hit that moment. There was nowhere left to hide behind language. When they finally called him back in, the air in the boardroom was still as glass. No one raised their voice. No one had to. Linda spoke first, reading from a single printed line. Effective immediately, Richard Hayes is placed on administrative leave pending full investigation. He froze. Not disbelief, just the math of power finally running out. Someone from HR stood near the door. Security waited in the hallway, trying not to be seen but not pretending anymore either. Richard looked through the glass, past the board, past the lawyers, straight at me. Our eyes met for 3 seconds that felt longer than the last 2 years. He wanted something. Pity, maybe, or recognition. A silent plea for dignity. I gave him neither. No nod, no smirk, just stillness. The kind that hurts worse than words. He adjusted his tie, muttered something under his breath about loyalty, then turned toward the door. His reflection passed over the company logo on the glass, Skycore, before disappearing entirely. The guard stepped forward. The door clicked shut behind them. 3:50 p.m. The sound of his shoes faded down the hallway. The kind of sound that tells you the story just changed owners. Inside the boardroom, the tension broke, but no one relaxed. They all knew what it meant. The game wasn't over, just rewritten. The CEO was gone. The truth was loose. And the company that had buried its conscience under glass and steel now had to face it. I looked at the clock, the same one that started ticking the day she said, "You report to me." 10 minutes left until 4. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits, quiet and patient, for the right hour to strike. Clara stood up slowly, like a soldier called from the wreckage. Her hands were still trembling, but her eyes, those had changed. There was no defiance left, just the kind of exhaustion that finally makes room for truth. "I'm ready to cooperate," she said. No drama, no tears, just that. Legal leaned forward, pens scratching, eyes flicking between her and the folder still open on the table. One of them started asking questions, quiet but sharp. She answered each, careful, measured. Every word she spoke built another bridge back to honesty, and burned another behind her. I stayed silent. When the room turned toward me, I said the only thing that mattered. "Justice isn't revenge," I told them. "It's prevention." For a long second, no one spoke. Then Linda looked at me. Really looked at me. Not as the man who exposed the fire, but as the one who refused to walk away from the ashes. In that glance, I could tell she understood. We weren't fixing people. We were fixing the foundation. Revenge cleans a wound. Justice prevents the next one. Outside, the building creaked as the air system kicked on, the sound of something old still trying to keep the temperature steady. Inside, the shift was quieter, an invisible gravity changing direction. Clara kept her eyes on the table, voice low. "I'll give you everything," she said. And for the first time, I believed her. Sometimes redemption doesn't roar back, it whispers. By morning, my access was restored. No announcement, no apology, just a system ping, a password reset, and the quiet return of my name to the company directory. I logged in, opened the audit logs, and began walking them through the chain, the slow, meticulous ladder from numbers to signatures, from authorization keys to timestamps. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. The data had rhythm, and truth always keeps time. Each line told its part. No adjectives, no excuses, just entries stacked like dominoes, one after another, leading back to the source. I didn't point fingers. I pointed clocks, showed them how the edits aligned, how 2 logins from different states hit the same document inside a 2-minute window, how signatures overlapped by milliseconds. The math spoke louder than morality ever could. Someone asked if I thought the system itself had failed. "No," I said. "People did. Systems just remember." Linda sat beside me, watching every entry, her pen idle. She didn't write a word. She didn't have to. When the last file closed, the room was silent except for the hum of the servers still running in the background. Proof that truth doesn't break under pressure, it waits. I leaned back, looked around the room filled with executives, lawyers, and silence. "I'm not here to bury anyone," I said finally. "I'm here to make sure it never happens again." The monitors dimmed to sleep mode. In the reflection I saw faces, some guilty, some ashamed, some just relieved to still have jobs. I said nothing more. I'd already learned, the less I spoke, the louder the truth sounded. By mid-afternoon, the board reconvened behind a wall of glass and whispers. No one checked their phones anymore. The air itself felt wired, every second heavier than the last. The first vote came quickly, unanimous. Richard Hayes, suspended pending investigation. The words hung in the air, flat and final. The man who once signed my paychecks was now a liability with a pulse. Next came the second motion, temporary suspension of the board member whose credentials had co-signed those falsified approvals. No one said their name out loud. They didn't need to. The silence pointed sharper than any finger could. Clara sat 3 chairs from the end, her posture straight but her hands trembling beneath the table. Linda had placed her under witness protection, internal classification, access limited, contact restricted. Not a punishment. Not yet. Just containment. Mark entered quietly, carrying a drive sealed in a labeled envelope. Snapshot log, verified copy. He handed it to legal, then met my eyes for a split second. No words. Just the acknowledgement between 2 men who'd built truth into code. 3:58 p.m. The second hand on the wall clock jerked forward, the kind of movement that pulls your chest tight. The kind of sound that tells you you're standing exactly where time decides to change direction. In 2 minutes, the audit would start. Not another meeting, not another report. The real thing, the one that counts every lie, measures every omission, and records who looks away first. Outside, the sunlight began to dim through tinted glass. Inside, everyone stopped pretending to breathe normally. 2 minutes to 4. The blade was drawn, and everyone in that room knew exactly where it would fall. The clock struck 4. No alarms, no fanfare, just a sound so clean it split the moment in 2. Linda called the session to order. Her voice was steady, practiced, stripped of everything human but the truth. "Commencing formal audit proceedings," she read. "Skycore operations, internal and executive divisions." Every sentence she spoke landed like metal on stone, sharp, measured, irreversible. I sat in the back, hands clasped, watching the process unfold. The same board that once smiled through falsified reports now stared at their own signatures projected 6 feet tall. Nobody coughed. Nobody blinked. Linda's tone never changed. She read the timeline in order, each point a hammer driving a nail. February 14th, unauthorized adjustments logged. March 3rd, delegation chain confirmed. March 18th, concealment attempt detected. The words weren't loud, but they carried weight, real weight. Because justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be heard in full. Mark's logs appeared on screen, clean, precise, untouched. The data flowed like a confession coded in light. Clara sat still, eyes forward, accepting what she'd helped ignite. Linda paused at the final page, looked up once. "The evidence," she said, "stands uncontested." And just like that, the room exhaled, not in relief, but in surrender. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't speak, because this wasn't my victory. It wasn't revenge. It was the truth finally speaking for itself, and when it spoke, it sounded nothing like anger. It sounded like justice. Richard left the building just after sunset. No escort, no cameras, no words. The glass doors hissed open, spilling a slice of golden light across the polished floor, and for a second it almost looked like grace. Almost. His tie hung loose, sweat darkening the collar. The mask he'd worn for years, charm, control, certainty, was gone now, replaced by something smaller. A man, not a myth. The Austin sun hit him square in the face as he stepped out, sharp and hot, reflecting off the tower windows like judgment made of glass. He squinted, maybe from the light, maybe from everything finally catching up to him. Behind him, no one clapped, no one spoke. Just the hum of servers inside, the quiet mechanical breath of a company beginning to exhale after holding its lies too long. He walked toward the parking lot, shoulders stiff, carrying a leather folder that probably didn't matter anymore. When the doors sealed shut behind him, the sound was small, one soft click, but it carried farther than any applause ever could. Because silence, in moments like that, is the verdict. No press releases, no headlines, no heroes, just an ending written in quiet. He'd built his empire on noise, buzzwords, meetings, applause. But the thing that finished him didn't shout. It simply closed the door. Clara left next. Her steps were slower, unsteady. One arm held her handbag tight to her chest like a shield. The other brushed at tears she didn't have time to hide. Security walked half a pace behind her, not hostile, just present. Procedure. Her white blazer, the one she'd worn the day she took my job, still hung over her chair upstairs. A single sleeve draped across the armrest, like a ghost reaching for something already gone. On the desk beside it sat her coffee cup, a faint lipstick mark on the rim, the last trace of someone who once believed ambition could rewrite truth. The perfume that used to trail her through the halls had already started to fade, leaving behind only the sterile scent of air conditioning and paper. No one spoke her name, not out of cruelty, out of fatigue, the kind that comes after a long storm when there's nothing left to salvage. She paused by the exit, turned once toward the glass lobby where her reflection shimmered and vanished beneath the glare. For a heartbeat, I almost saw the person she could have been, sharp, brilliant, uncorrupted. Then the automatic doors opened and she was gone. The white blazer, the lipstick stain, the fading perfume, they stayed. Symbols, nothing more. Ambition doesn't need a spotlight to die. Sometimes it just burns out quietly, in daylight, while the world keeps moving on. The call came that night, after the headlines had cooled, but before the dust had settled. Linda's voice on the line, steady, professional, but softer than I remembered. "The board wants you to return. Temporary oversight," she said. I let the words hang there, listening to them echo across the empty house. Oversight, a word that used to mean control, now redefined as watchfulness, protection. "Temporary," I repeated. "Yes, that's how it should be." We both knew it wasn't about the title anymore. After the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my hands. They didn't shake. Not from adrenaline, not from anger. For the first time in years, they were still. That's when I realized something simple but brutal. I hadn't been fighting to keep a job. I'd been fighting to keep myself, the part that still believed in the point of doing things right, even when no one's watching. The night outside was quiet, the kind that only comes after storms. My reflection in the window didn't look like a victor, just a man who'd finally stopped running from what he knew to be true. I'd lost power, titles, friends. But somewhere in the middle of all that noise, I'd found the one thing they could never take: clarity. You don't win by standing over others. You win by standing back up over yourself. The next morning, I walked through the office again. It was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No forced laughter, no buzzwords bouncing off glass. Just the sound of lights warming up, shifting from the cold white of long nights to a softer amber. I moved slow, not inspecting, not judging, just seeing. The conference table was empty. The air finally smelled clean, no perfume, no panic. I passed the break room, where the coffee machine hummed weakly, still running from the day before. I pressed the button, watched the light fade, and shut it off. In Clara's old office, her chair sat pushed back, a ghost of motion left behind. On the backrest, her white jacket still hung, untouched. I reached for it, smoothed the fabric, and hung it neatly where it belonged. Not as tribute, not as forgiveness. Just closure. I closed the file cabinet, one drawer at a time, each click a quiet punctuation mark to an overlong sentence. When I finally turned toward the door, the morning sun hit the glass in front of me. For the first time, it didn't feel like it was reflecting judgment. It felt like light coming through. I didn't take a victory lap, didn't say a word. Some chapters end loud, others end in small gestures. Switches flipped, drawers closed, jackets returned. That's how you know it's really over. You end it yourself, with your own hands. The diner hadn't changed. Same cracked leather booths, same waitress with the tired smile, same jukebox humming through the static. The kind of place where the coffee's always burnt and the world feels far enough away to breathe again. I slid into my usual corner booth, the one that faced the window and the neon sign that never stopped flickering. Ordered black coffee, no sugar. It came hot, bitter, honest, just the way I liked it. Outside, the highway hummed with trucks heading nowhere in particular. Inside, the radio stumbled into Bruce Springsteen's "I'm on Fire." The sound was thin, a little warped, but it still cut clean through the quiet. I leaned back, let the steam rise between my hands, and just breathed. No badge, no passwords, no boardrooms pretending to care about integrity. Just me, the hum of the lights, and the silence that finally didn't feel heavy. The truth had done its job. It didn't need me anymore. I didn't check the news, didn't scroll my phone. The world could move on without me for one night. There's a kind of freedom that doesn't shout. It doesn't come with applause or redemption arcs. It just sits quietly across from you at a diner at midnight, sipping coffee and saying nothing. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. The next morning, my phone lit up with 2 messages. Mark first. Thanks for keeping us clean. Then Linda. Noted. No emojis, no signatures. No, just 2 sentences. One from gratitude, one from duty. I stared at the screen for a while, watching the words fade into the background light. The apartment was still dark, blinds half open, morning sun cutting through the dust like thin ribbons of smoke. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Some things don't require acknowledgement. I set the phone face down on the table and looked at the reflection in the black glass. A tired man who'd finally stopped carrying other people's sins on his back. Outside, a lawn sprinkler hissed. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. Life moving, unbothered. I smiled. Small, quiet, real. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Recognition isn't fireworks. It's peace. It's knowing that when the smoke clears, you didn't bend, you didn't lie, and you didn't let the rot spread past your watch. I sipped my coffee and listened to the morning settle. No emails, no alarms, no more countdowns. Just silence. And silence finally meant safety. People destroy themselves if you hand them the right truth at the right time. I didn't say that to be clever, it's just what I learned watching them do it, over and over. There was a time I thought anger was power, that if you shouted loud enough you could scare the world into being fair. But anger's a young man's fire. It burns quick and blinds you while it does. What lasts isn't rage, it's clarity. I didn't take anyone down. The truth did its own work, quiet, efficient, like gravity. All I did was stop standing in its way. When it was over, I walked out the same way I'd walked in years ago. Empty hands, steady steps. A man who finally remembered why he started building things in the first place. The building looked different that day. Not smaller, just mortal. Like every tower we raise out of ego eventually learns its height isn't protection, it's exposure. I passed the glass doors, felt the sun hit my face, and didn't look back. No bitterness, no victory speech. Just peace, slow and steady, settling into the space where resentment used to live. They took my chair, I took back myself, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. I got in my truck, rolled the window down, let the hot Texas wind whip through the cab. The radio was silent. I didn't turn it on. Some endings don't need music, they just need quiet.